Hello and welcome to Inside OUSD. I'm John Sasaki. Right now the district has some major changes that have to come to the budget, or there could be consequences from the state and county. To gain a better understanding of the budget and the challenges we're facing, we're joined now by the Chief Business Officer here in OUSD, Lisa Grant-Dawson. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. And now you've been here for 4 years.
Yes.
Good long time here in OUSD doing the kind of work that you do. You've also done a lot of similar work at other districts like Vallejo, Stockton, et cetera. What motivates you in this very difficult work that you do?
The ability for a community to have normalcy is based on schools being open, children thriving. And I do this work because my community faced a very similar challenge with state receivership and the lack of understanding as to why. And so I do this work because there needs to be a why, there needs to be solutions. And so I like to be part of solutions-oriented programming. So that's why I do what I do.
Excellent. So school funding is incredibly complex. And to the extent that a lot of your counterparts who do similar work in the private sector could walk in here and really wouldn't know how to do this because there's so many there's so much minutia. How is it that you would describe kind of in a nutshell that our budget is? What is our budget?
So I was one of those people that didn't necessarily know about fund accounting and governmental accounting and never knew that a school district could even be under a financial hardship as they are. So our budget is made up of ultimately tax dollars and resources, local and state. And it's driven primarily based on our enrollment. And when there's changes in a community, in a city, that your public school education program is in, it will directly create changes in your funding up and down. And so, with that, that's the main crux of it. It's our enrollment and it's also our attendance, which really drives the dollars that we receive.
Well, and then there's also what we talk about, restricted and unrestricted dollars, and a lot of the restricted dollars are private dollars that we get donated. I think that we raise something like $100 million a year through our superintendent and others on the team. So how would you differentiate between those two buckets, the unrestricted and the restricted dollars?
So unrestricted, though also made up of dollars that can only be used for, in our case, students that we serve. Those students, again, are what we call unduplicated, which ultimately means a student that may have language or economic support that's needed. So we receive additional dollars to support our students that have additional needs. So that's unrestricted. And then restricted has even more specificity, whether it's federal, state, or local. As you mentioned, philanthropic resources, they have various provisions as to how we can spend the resources, and so we have to abide by the compliance for each funding stream.
And one real important point about that, though, is that with restricted dollars, you can't do things like fund ongoing needs. Is that correct?
As long as those ongoing needs are from the district being a public school entity. So no, I can't use restricted resources to pay our utility bills. No, I can't use restricted resources to pay ongoing your school district and operation expenses. So that would be correct.
And even to the extent that in some ways you can't use it to pay teachers or pay principals or pay custodians, because those are ongoing costs every year. Is that not correct?
That is correct. So you can pay for specific positions, but when we look at restricted resources, it's supplemental. It's what can we do above and beyond what our unrestricted base funding provides that will meet the needs of our students and ultimately provide the quality education and experience that they deserve.
So right now, we are deficit spending.
We are.
And of course, what that means is we're spending more money than we're bringing in revenues. And this year, you've projected that we're going to be $79 million as a deficit for this current year. And then next year, you've actually just recently upped the number to like 95. That is in the 25-26 school year, if we don't do anything now to stop this deficit spending. Why do we have this deficit?
We have this deficit because the district has been under receivership for over 20 years. We've never solved the multi-year deficit issue. Recently, we shared that the state loan that the district received, $100 million. Sound familiar? 195. We never addressed it. And we paid $20 million to borrow that money. So the reason that we're in the deficit is that we've never solved our long-term systemic financial issues, we solve them year by year. And so with that, we never get to that place of being able to address it so that we can move forward.
And can you just in a nutshell give us an idea of what those long-term issues are that we haven't solved?
So as the district received, for instance, local control funding formula, starting in 2013-14 when that change happened, we didn't use that as an opportunity to reset how we operate. We actually started spending more. So again, we continued to spend beyond our means, and in 2016-17, we were at another crisis point where we did not meet our reserve requirement. And a reserve is 3% of our total expenditures. It's our savings account. What if something happens? We need to have an amount of money saved away, and we didn't meet that criteria. So we've had these dip points where they've been lower, but that's primarily the reason that we've had the challenges that we've had.
And of course that's like different boards, different staff, different superintendents, and so what you have now is what you're dealing with now, right? It's not a matter of, oh, we can't go back 10 years and like fix things. Mm-hmm. So like that's just the nature of what exists now.
It's a cumulative effect of that, but it's also the culture of every year the district figures out a way to fix it, to save it, to fix it, to save it. Can we use one-time money? Can we get more philanthropic resources? And that is not sustainable. And so we've modeled that perfectly. It's not sustainable. The same question that was asked 20 years ago, what are you going to do, is the same question that we're asking 20 years later, and within less than 2 years of exiting receivership, at least by the financial component of paying our loan payment.
And more recently, we've actually kind of been bolstered by all this ESSER funds, the money that came in because of the COVID pandemic, and so that was a couple $100 million that went a long way to helping us, but now that money is basically gone.
Correct.
And so that's kind of, I mean, people have talked about a financial cliff that a lot of school districts are going through because of that. So and it's just all, and of course a lot of this is related to our dropping enrollment.
Yes.
Right? I mean, just since the pandemic, we're down 2,000 to 3,000 students.
Yes. And when I arrived at the district, there wasn't a defined knowledge that our enrollment was declining. Not in the sense that people understood what the impact would be. And I think it's because logistically you still see the city as the same size. We still have the same number of schools open. So you don't have that context to say something is declining because we don't look at all of our schools and the enrollment as a collective. Yeah. Individuals. But as a school district, we did. And so, we have shared, we've gone from being a close to 60,000 student district to a 30,000 district school district, and are projecting to continue to decline.
So there could be more loss of kids.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, birth rates are down.
Absolutely.
Just these simple things
Correct.
that we have no control over.
Correct.
That are impacting
Correct.
what we're doing.
And the cost of living is a big driver for our district. There are other communities that are declining, not as fast, and others that are growing, as we know in California, but not as fast.
So obviously there have to be changes. Some of those will be cuts. What has to be cut? I mean, because you only have a limited number of things that can be cut, right? Yeah. So what has to be, what can be cut to save the kind of money we're talking about?
Right. So I do prefer the word. I mean, I think that's the other thing that the district, the word and the action cut is very different than restructuring. And why? Because there's strategy behind restructuring. Mm-hmm. And we have cut, and we've cut things that we have had long-term effects, and then we've cut things that, like, wow, we still need to be able to maintain, and so we've buffered in those areas. So strategically, we are looking at the entire district construct. Our revenues are again built on the number of students that we have, staffing,
and in classrooms.
Yeah. So staffing is a large component of it. Programs, in addition to what we're doing, and to the extent that we may be doing some things that we just don't have the resources, unrestricted or restricted, to cover. We have made a commitment and are meeting that commitment with each bargaining unit to increase compensation, which is very important and something that we didn't do historically when our resources were growing at the degree that we have done it them most recently. And so those things, become very important for us to continue to manage and maintain. So those are the areas that we'll be looking at, as well as others.
And to be clear, we're talking about a $900 million budget. Is that roughly?
As far as the total district?
Yeah.
Oh, I think we still continue to embrace. We are a $1 billion organization with all of our funds and resources. And with that being said, the management therein of it is a huge responsibility. So with that, we do have staffing in multiple funds. We do have a child development fund. We do have an adult ed. So all of the decisions that we make that we primarily talk about, the general fund, affect every other fund and resource in the district.
Well, but if we're talking about a $95 million deficit next year, I mean, that's pretty close to 10% of this district.
Correct.
Right? And given the fact that, 75% of our funds go to pay people?
Correct.
Our staff, teachers?
Close to 85. 85 and above. Again, we've added more staffing and the cost of and the value of staffing. So that includes the retirement, that includes our health benefits. That whole compensation package has grown. And you mentioned since the pandemic has grown, especially as healthcare costs have grown.
Right. And retirement costs.
And retirement costs have grown.
Yeah, okay. All right, and so, I mean, obviously these adjustments, the restructuring is going to have to come from somewhere. People, services, our footprint. I mean, those are the three choices. And when you're talking like 85% of the $1 billion goes to pay people, I mean, obviously there's not a lot of stuff that you can work with outside of that, $200 million to cover everything else, maybe $150 million to cover everything else. So, I mean, it has to come somewhere.
It does. And efficiencies I would add to, because again, the way the district is structured, I call it, a franchise model where we have individual organizations within one unified school district. And there are places where we can add some significant efficiencies. And so with that being said, that's another area, for us to continue to look at. And we've done that. We need to do more distinct efficiency building to help with managing not only costs, but maintaining programs.
Contractors is a big issue that a lot of people raise. Okay, we pay a lot of money out to various entities to support us in doing what we do. Why can't we just cut all those contracts?
So that's a multifaceted answer. But what I will say is that there are things that any organization does that is their core competency. We're a public education entity. We teach children. There are other support and that we need that is not our core competency, things that we don't do, things that may be hard to hire for. There are also other agreements and components as it relates to taking care of the whole child, as well as the adults. So a lot of our contracts too support, our staff as well. So the answer to that is not why can't we just cut all of the contracts? It's how do we use our contracts more efficiently and effectively, and what can we perhaps scale back in what we're doing, and what will the impact be long term and short term.
And just to name a couple of contracts, I mean, one is Zoom, which provides our bus services to our kids who are special education and to and from school every day.
Correct.
And then another is, you talked about the CBOs, community-based organizations that do a lot of the support of our kids.
Right, a lot. And so that impact, will impact the, community as well, because we do have a relationship with our local businesses. But again, our finances, are strained and constrained, and we do need to make some adjustments. So it will be a full economic effect that we're trying to manage responsibly and communicate the whys with the prioritization that we'll be recommending.
Another thing that some people say is, why don't we just chop from the top? Like the implication being that we just get rid of a bunch of our management or all of our management. And so let's just say, for the sake of argument, we got rid of all the management, including you, including our superintendent, others. How much money would that save, and is that a viable option?
So, great question. It would mean that the district would be a board-led district. If you didn't have your management, it means that the board and some other infrastructure would support, we just said, a $1 billion organization. And so that's what that would look like. How much money would we save? So our current management structure is made up of unrestricted and restricted funded positions. So it would mean that we would eliminate perhaps about 35 million of management, and that's a broad range of positions that would be included, in that management rung. And I'm not talking about principals or assistant principals or school-based positions. And so even if we did that, it means that we would need to not apply, or we would potentially not be eligible for certain resources. We apply for a lot of grants, we apply for a lot of resources, but they require you to manage them. They require you to report properly. And so not having that infrastructure means that we would not be able to do that successfully. So is it a conversation to have? How lean can we make management? Yes, but it still won't solve the global problem, especially when the undertow still is, can we grow? We need more. So that's how I would answer that question.
I would also add that since I got here 8 years ago, our management team is much smaller than it was when, back in 2016.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of positions eliminated to kind of bolster all of this. There kind of an odd argument out there that we're hiding money, and that what we're talking about right now is a manufactured crisis, so to speak. How do you respond?
So you raised earlier that the board has changed, the superintendent has changed, and various staff members have changed, and others have remained the same. Manufactured crises don't last over 20 years. And so what I would say is that for those that believe that it's a manufactured crisis, we have welcomed that engagement. We welcome people to share with us what they see beyond what we see internally when we publish our projections and our financial reports that then go to the state and the county to be reviewed. So if that vetting is happening with our finances, and we still have had moments over this course of time where there's been questions about, hey, you don't have what you need in order to continue to move forward. We welcome that engagement with folks. I share often. People share that they're really concerned about the budget or they have questions about the budget, but I really don't get a lot of emails and phone calls about that. So again, my email is lisa.grant-dawson@ousd.org, and very happy along with my team to engage.
Well, and to that point, I would think that like anywhere that anybody who's on staff or families or whoever sees an inefficiency, sees a place where we could save some money.
Absolutely.
Whether it's $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000, I mean, we want to hear about it.
We want to hear about it. And we do want to maintain what we've built, and that's why the decisions that need to be made that haven't been made over time. So this is, again, not about one individual, one board, one superintendent. This is a cumulative hidden historical component that we have the pleasure of continuing with now, but now is the time.
And to your point, I mean, the time's pretty short now. Board has to make a decision in December.
Yes.
And so that's a big task. There's a lot that has to go on between now and then. We certainly want our families, our staff, our students engaged in this process. We want to hear their input. We want to hear what they want to see after these changes take place. What's your final message to everybody?
These changes will be unpopular. They're going to be things that people do not want to do. But they've been many of the same things that we've talked about pre-me that the district needed to do to recalibrate and to reset. And so what I would say is we've stated numerous times, to do nothing is not an option. We have clearly run out of space to be able to adjust things in the way that we have before. And so I would just ask that we have the partnership to work through it together, just as families do with their own independent budgets. How do we work together to balance? That's what we're seeking to do. And that what we have to make adjustments for is not about any individual, any particular school or program, but it is about balancing the whole and trying to maintain what we do have with the resources that we have. Otherwise, we won't be able to pay individuals. We won't be able to pay our invoices. We won't be able to keep our lights on, literally, with costs that continue to grow. So with that, we just ask for the respectful engagement as well as the support with ideas and thoughts. And we look forward to continuing this journey.
Very good. Thank you, Lisa Grant-Dawson, for joining us. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
And thank you for joining us. I'm John Sasaki. We will see you next time on another episode of Inside OUSD.